loans, obviously, and kind of what that looks like here in Canada. So first of all, Ken kind of talked about who we are, so personally, but also, the Murray Auto Group here. So we are Murray Morden. We are part of a group that has over 30 dealerships across the country. So they're not just Dodge dealers for new as well. We obviously represent Dodge and FCA products here at our Morden store, but they do have GMC, Cadillac, Honda, lots of different brands as well. So again, Ken touched on the sales and finance team here. We are rooted in Morden. We do have a combined 50 years of sales and finance experience and provides and services in English, Filipino, and Spanish. A little bit more about just who we are. Credit is an important thing that is never properly explained to people. Maybe education systems are different around the world, but certainly in Canada, it is not something that's ever really taught in the schooling system. So credit is key to any kind of borrowing. I mean, we're talking vehicle loans again today, but if you're going to want to mortgage any of these things in Canada, it all comes back to your credit score. So credit ranges on a score from 3 to 900. Lots of people can track your credit nowadays on different apps, so you might have an idea of where that score is. 6 to 700 is probably an okay credit score. When you're new to Canada, a lot of people will fall into that 6 to 700 range to start. And that's not bad. You're just kind of beginning your credit journey. I think I put that word in here lots. So some of the things that impact credit, and more so when you're new to Canada and when you're building that credit situation, is the amount of credit you use. So the first thing that a lot of newcomers get when they get to Canada is a credit card, right? You get your $1,000, your $2,000 limit. The usage that you have on a revolving credit facility impacts your credit score. So if you have a $2,000 credit card, banks will say about 50%. You don't want to consistently keep a balance over $1,000. So, I mean, that's one of the biggest unknown factors in credit. The biggest thing that impacts your score is still payment, making your payments on time. Oh, thank you, sir. Payments on time and just your balances and just staying on top of that. So, later missed, I guess is what I was going to say there. So later missed payments are just the biggest derogatory credit hit. So circling back to kind of vehicle loans specifically, it doesn't matter your status in Canada when you get here. Foreign worker or permanent resident, even with no credit here, they will consider you for a loan with a 10 to 15% down payment. If you're on a work permit, depending on which bank we go through, most of them will cap us on the term of the work permit. So there are some exceptions, but work permit, there is options. They're just a little bit more limited in the term that you can borrow to. But anyone landing in Canada as a permanent resident, so I mean, even if you've been here for 2 weeks, if you have employment, so you have income and a down payment for a vehicle, you certainly have the ability to get approved, right, within a couple weeks. So it tells a little bit about credit. And this just talks about, so why credit is important, right? So when borrowing for vehicles, I mean, rates can vary very widely. The two different varies there. English language is beautiful for that. 549 to 1849 is a legitimate spread that we might see from new to used, from sterling to some troubled credit situations. And it just shows you the difference of borrowing cost over a same 5-year term for a rate at 5.49 versus 18.49, like almost $20,000 in 5 years in interest. So a lot of times people hear an interest rate, but what is that? Well, okay, 10%, 15%. What does that actually mean, right? So seeing how that relates to your payments, seeing how that relates to your total cost of borrowing and total cost of ownership, maybe just a good breakdown for people to see. And then kind of tying it back in again, I try not to make this too painfully long here for you guys, but part of what we're doing here is just educating. So this, I mean, free sandwiches, free education here. Thank you guys for coming tonight. But happy to also just kind of provide this knowledge and give you guys that base. A lot of things that people don't realize is vehicle lending allows you to borrow beyond the value of a vehicle. So with a new vehicle, a lot of the time, if you're buying a $50,000 SUV, you could probably borrow $75,000 comfortably against that vehicle. If you have a $3,000 credit card at your bank at 22% interest, there's a very good chance that we could give you a check to pay that off, roll it into your loan, and you're carrying it at 5.49% for that debt load that you already have. So again, I'm not trying to make this too confusing with some of the options that they have here, but just enables you to lower your debt load to a more comfortable interest rate and put it into one payment. So if you want to discuss that further, just let me know and I can give you some business cards here. And again, I think part of what we talked about earlier with Carl and Manny too is just removing some of the language barriers for newcomers here to Canada and just making that a little bit more comfortable and easier experience for you guys. So with that being said, questions, concerns, anything you guys really wanted to know about vehicle purchasing or credit or fun things to do?
Is it better to get a new car or a used car?
For what, sorry?
If I'm a newcomer, is it better to get a new car or a used
car? Depends what you're looking for, my friend. As far as credit-wise, there's not really an impact for borrowing. They're looking at like installment loans at that point. So, I mean, both are going to further establish you as a borrower. One thing I didn't really talk about outside of the newcomer program. So, I mean, there's that, you have 10 to 15% down and you can qualify as a newcomer. There's a program for that. Once you're a more established Canadian borrower, which I would say takes 12 to 24 months, so like 1 to 2 years, you would just qualify as a regular applicant at that point. So just some, I guess, other things to be aware of as you progress through your credit journey again. Credit card, maybe a small line of credit or a small installment loan, which sets you up to take that next step to a vehicle purchase. Because sometimes if you've been here for 2 years, you have a credit card and trying to make a jump to a $25,000 or $50,000 vehicle, it's a big next step for credit, right? So maybe just getting something in the interim, some bigger limit credit card or a line of credit or a smaller loan, just gives you some options there.
So you're saying that if we want to purchase a car, vehicle, we can get a loan from bank, like credit card loan from bank?
Within reason. So again, depending on the dollar amount that you had on a credit card to pay off, yeah. I mean, for a lot of people, like, if I would say on a new vehicle, if it's less than $10,000, it's pretty realistic that we could pay it off and put it into the new vehicle. Depending, again, on your credit situation, how established you are as a borrower in Canada, but yeah, it's certainly an option.
Then do we have to take an appointment, or is there a program from bank that we need to...
Like, so it would be with a vehicle, right? Like you're buying a new vehicle, and as a part of that vehicle, we'll pay off whatever other lending that you're thinking about in this scenario. And I'll tell you what the payment would kind of look like to consolidate it into one. So I can give you one of my cards if you want to send me a scenario and we can talk about it. But again, questions, concerns? Yes.
It matters if I had a work permit for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Can I take the credit for 48 months?
So you have a work permit for 36 months. Depending on the bank. One bank would give us probably 5 or 6 years on it, but it would be at a higher interest rate. Mm-hmm. Most of the main banks that we work with would cap us at the work permit until you get your permanent residency. Mm-hmm. But they'll still look at any credit that you're establishing during that time, right? So even if you're not a Canadian citizen or a PR yet, mm-hmm. anything you're establishing as a foreign worker is still building your credit file. So once you get that permanent residency, basically your social insurance number changes and the way you go at that point. So here, if you have any other questions around that, by all means. Anyone else? Questions, concerns?
It depends upon our line of credit, how much loan we can get.
Yeah, like, I'll kind of review some calculations with you if you're looking at it. We'll talk about maybe some different vehicles that you guys are looking at and see what that would look like for you. Like, so it's hard to explain the calculation without having a vehicle in mind. Based on essentially the MSRP of that new vehicle is how much we could borrow against it for whatever else we're looking at. So we can do that calculation once we talk a little bit more.
And how much we can pay initially.
Yeah, we'll talk about all that. Mm-hmm. All right, more sandwiches.